Yes, well, there is that saying about swinging a cat around by the tail to exemplify the dimensional restrictions in a room, but this here cat will remain unswung in circles regardless of the reasons. So, don't even think about it, Rex. Sometimes I wish I were telepathic too. Tell me more about Enki.
He could be considered one of the greatest of the Reptilian Orion scientists, with his genetic ingenuity. However, his greed was one of his other and less admirable characteristics. He refused to send the gold back to the homeworld, in dereliction of his duties to his people, and disregard of the Queen's authority. This became apparent to the Queen as contact with Enki was broken. To allay her suspicions, she would send his older brother, Enlil, to investigate.
I don't know where that phrase, swinging a cat, came from. Must have been a concept created by a very unimaginable individual. You don't ever hear one about swinging a lizard around by the tail. Obviously, we are not talking about crocodiles here. I was thinking more along the lines of a small and less likely to amputate a limb turtle or something.
Have you finished? May I continue? Or must we hear further essential information about the various species that can be swung by the tail? Okay? Good. Enlil would come to Earth and discover Enki's treachery, that he was hoarding gold. What transpired, however, was negotiation between the brothers. The gold was shared, the planet Earth effectively divided in two. They would proceed to send food supplies back to the home world, but this was not enough to feed the species. So they began to send cattle also.
I'm glad to see Reptilian brothers can settle their grievances so gracefully. I once had a fallout with my brother, Clive the cat, over an old fish. That was years ago, and we haven't spoken since. Luckily, I don't hold grudges, but if you ever do come across Clive throughout your travels, Rex, whack him upside the head from me, and remind him he still owes me a fish. Anyway, do continue.
Yes, anyway, as I was saying, because the Orions now were utilizing protein of this kind for sustenance, their body shapes would be altered consequently, as they would become meat-eaters. One of the unfortunate side effects of consuming a diet based on meat was an inability to reproduce. Enki would come up with a solution, leaning towards his brilliance as a geneticist. What he would do next was break a fundamental law of creation, that of altering another species' DNA.
It's a pity you couldn't have altered the DNA of canines too, to make them less inclined to chase cats. Oh, and also genetically endowing them with better attention to personal hygiene. And while you're at it, program them not to chew up the newspapers. Honestly, what an annoying trait. Anyway, perhaps something to bear in mind if you reptilians ever do such DNA altering again in the future. Do continue with the whole DNA thing. It is fascinating.
The reptilians altered the codons of the intelligent monkeys and gave them the ability to reproduce at will. This was not for the benefit of the monkeys. It was for a constant supply of slave workers. The genetically altered slaves had the function of harvesting the crops for food supplies and the mining of the gold. So, effectively, what began as a monkey became one of a more intelligent variety, and has developed into the species we see today, the human.
Some might argue it wasn't much of a development, considering what I see shuffling around the streets, an oblivious species clutching mind-programming communication devices. Isn't it great to be a cat? I can be rude and derogatory to both reptilians and humans alike, present company excepted, of course.